So you've got to say it.
Oh.
It's very complicated to sort out these videos if you don't.
Choice 2, 18 September, second lesson.
Okay. All right. So the major castes within the termite colony, so a group of termites living together as a colony, a group of wild dogs living together as a pack. All right. The major castes are the reproductive or reproductives. I'll talk about that. The soldiers and the workers. The members of each caste are structurally different because they've got different functions to perform. And together they ensure the survival of the actual colony. Okay, do you guys remember from primary school what the term metamorphosis meant?
Yeah. Butterflies.
Yeah, okay, so butterflies are an example. The issue is when an organism hatches from an egg, okay, when an organism hatches from an egg, what stages does it go through before it becomes an adult? So if you think back to your silkworm days. Okay, so in the case of silkworms, so metamorphosis refers to a change in structure as an organism ages. So a little puppy growing into an adult is not metamorphosis, because all that is growth. Okay, but an egg hatching into a larva, which was the good old little silkworm you used to have in the box, eating the leaves. So in the case of a silkworm, it was a egg, larva, pupa, which in a silkworm was, remember, not the same thing as a cocoon, but remember that in the case of a silkworm, they pupated within a cocoon of silk. Okay? So this is a change in structure, so that what hatches from the egg is not the same as the adult. And so this refers to metamorphosis. Now there are different kinds of metamorphoses. For example, this is a complete metamorphosis, but you get dragonfly. A dragonfly is an egg, a nymph, a nymph, a nymph, a nymph, a nymph, a nymph, an adult. And there's not such a distinct difference between what hatches from the egg and what is an adult. Okay, there are differences. It grows wings. Grasshopper does incomplete metamorphosis. But as long as you understand the term metamorphosis.
I'm confused. What is a pupa?
Oh, did you ever break open a cocoon?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
Which is horrifying because everyone's saying you killed the thing inside. That little brown case inside is a pupa. It's actually absolutely fascinating because what actually happens is this structure completely breaks down to a massive liquid inside a pupa and rearranges itself to becoming an adult. And it's absolutely fascinating that it's able to do that. It's like a mystery in the world.
The pupa was the actual cocoon. Well,
No, the brown thing inside is a pupa and then there's a cocoon. Because the majority of insects don't have a cocoon around their pupa.
I don't know why you say brown, because the one I had was more red.
Really brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So flies also have a pupa, but they don't have a cocoon. Okay, all right, everybody happy? So, and you know, obviously, frogs metamorphosis. Metamorphose.
Oh, it's that whole...
Yes. Egg.
Whatsy.
Kid misbehaving, of course. Okay. No, he was just
Let's
doing...
throw a brick at them.
Oh,
Stab them. Yes,
You've obviously spent too much time with me. Okay, all right, so You know that frogs undergo metamorphosis, so it'll be an egg tadpole, then that produces legs, gets rid of the gills and the fins, etc., and becomes an adult frog.
No, that's actually quite nuts when you think about it. Like, a human has to chill there inside of a person and be like, woo, for like 9 months. But like frogs, they lay like a couple 100,000 little like eggs, and those things grow into like frogs. Like, man, that's nuts when you think about it.
Frogs have amazing parental care things. Anyway, moving on.
Just leave them.
Hmm?
Don't they just leave them?
The majority of them do, but some of them don't. Some of them,
You see the majority
Them.
of men.
them, frogs.
I'm so jealous. It's like, I wish we could just leave our kids.
Some fish and some frogs have the most fascinating parental care things.
Like sharks.
Crabs.
Um,
Scorpions.
yeah. So there's one kind of frog has a very spongy layer on the back,
No,
and as soon as that the eggs are produced, they're pushed into the spongy layer, and so they actually go through their larval stages
on the frog.
on the adult frog. Then you see them little hands sticking out. Then they get bigger, and eventually they pop out of the sponge. And
But
yeah,
isn't
anyway.
that the equivalent of the wasp that it like lays its eggs in like a worm? And
Yes.
it's like the poor worm just gets slowly eaten from the inside. Those are gross. They come out, they're like, yeah.
It'll be a caterpillar, it's not a worm. Anyway, moving on. So termites undergo metamorphosis. Okay, they emerge from an egg as a nymph that eats and grows and eats and grows and sheds its exoskeleton a number of times before becoming an adult. So it doesn't do a pupa stage. It has the same kind of metamorphosis as a grasshopper does. Okay, you don't have to seriously worry about this. Okay, after molting several times, the young nymphs differentiate into different castes. Remember, blue font, you don't have to learn. This may take several months depending on how much food is available, on the temperature and the vigor of the colony. In other words, how healthy it is at that time. Okay, now I'm going to talk separately about the 3 different castes within the termite colony. So first of all, soldiers. And this is a picture of a soldier termite. It has incredibly big mandibles. Often the mandibles are so big that they can't feed themselves and the workers have to feed them because they can't get food they can't get their mouth close to food.
Soldiers.
So the workers actually have to feed them.
Oh,
So they've got very big, very powerful mandibles. You do not want to get bitten by one of these, it's sore. The head and the mandibles are used to defend the colony against predators, and their main predators actually ants. And this is quite interesting because you guys probably know these things as white ants or flying ants.
Flying ants.
And they're not
They're
ants,
termites.
they're termites.
That is disgusting.
And ants are actually their enemy.
Oh, cute.
So, soldiers, wingless, usually lack eyes. Now, the lack of eyes is generally an indication that something lives in the dark. So, fish that live in lakes and caves, for example, don't have eyes. But the majority of the soldiers don't have eyes.
There are some fish that, like, I just saw this on TV, that have eyes but they don't work. Meaning
Yeah.
that they used to have use.
Yes.
Over time,
Yes, they've lost it.
not used them.
Yeah, so what you will learn about next year in evolution is this whole thing of to produce anything is expensive in terms of energy to produce and maintain something. So wisdom teeth, for example, an appendix, to produce eyes when you're not going to use eyes because you live in a lake, in the cave, underground, etc. Most of those parts have lost their function, and in terms of evolution, mostly they're not producing them anymore. Anyway, soldiers can actually be either male or female,
Oh, gender equality.
but they don't produce reproductive organs.
Oh, so they are.
And that's that whole thing about don't waste energy producing and maintaining something that you're not going to use.
They can't have kids.
They can't have kids. Their function is defend.
So my Mother Nature kind of was like, you know, you're not going to have kids, but someone else in your colony will. So they didn't create. So how did this like hierarchy come?
We'll get there.
Okay. Evolution.
Okay. Their jaws are so enlarged they can't feed themselves. They're fed by the workers, and their main job is defense against enemies such as ants that prey on termites. Okay, so that's the end of the soldiers. Okay, workers, generally very pale in color, and this is what you possibly used to play with as kids on the bark of trees. You know, trees when they've got mud up the side where they've got termites, and you pull the mud off and then the little white insects scurrying all over the show. No? You didn't have a nice childhood. Okay. I did.
I'm not picking them apart.
Okay. All right. They're wingless. Some of them lack eyes. The ones that go outside and collect food do have eyes, but the ones that stay inside the termite mound don't.
Do they have feeders?
No.
Do they use what kind of like?
It's mostly pheromones. They can be either male or female, lack reproductive organs because they can't reproduce. They do have hardened mandibles and mouth parts, but that's because they chew the food. And they chew the food and then they feed it to the other ones. So their function is collect food, feed all the other members of the colony, which means the reproductives, the soldiers, and the little young ones. They groom all the other colony members. They clean them. They clean the queen. They clean the king. They clean the soldiers. And they construct and repair the nest, which may or may not be a termite mound depending on the kind of termite. So you always think of termites as living in a big termite mound. Not all species of termites do. Many of them just have colonies underneath the ground. Those are probably the ones that work in your backyard, and we'll talk about that now. So workers need very high humidity to survive because they've got a very soft body which is not covered with a thick exoskeleton. And so what they do is they carry mud into either wood. So if they're in your house, in the skirting boards, then they're carrying mud with them behind the skirting boards. If they're climbing up a tree and eating the bark of a tree, they carry mud with them, they pack it around, and they live within that mud, termite mound, etc., where they maintain a 97% relative humidity, which is very, very high in terms of humidity. Okay, all right. So here are some workers. These ones have antennae. This would be one that lives outside because it's got a dark body color. These are ones that live in the termite colony in the mound. And you can see that because they've got these little white soft bodies. Okay. Right, and then you've got the reproductives. Okay. So, let's talk firstly about the queen. So there's the queen.
Oh, it's huge! How does it walk?
And there's the king. It doesn't.
It doesn't say.
It's a big lump of reproduce.
It is just a sack of eggs.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So there's its head. There's its head and thorax and legs. There's the king, and this is just a bag of eggs.
That is so disgusting.
Cannot move and just gets fed by the workers and just lays eggs.
Get there first.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Okay.
What does he do?
Okay, wait.
Does it lay eggs all year round? So the king's just like, okay, here's some sperm.
Yes.
So, oh my god.
Low-key, though, she's chilling.
All right, so it goes like this. Okay, so let's talk about it from the time that a termite colony starts. Okay, so what will happen is when a termite colony is, so when it's been raining, so the ground is nice and soft and it's quite hot, so it's sort of spring or summertime, then what happens is you will see flying ants. They're not ants. They're reproductive termites. So what you might notice if you go and find the source of that is generally in Joburg we don't have the ones that make big mounds. You'll find a little hole in the ground in your back garden or wherever in your garden, and the flying ants, which are actually reproductive termites, are just pouring out of that.
Why do they go out and
So what they're doing is they're trying to start new colonies. So you know that what happens is they fly a little bit, they're not really good flyers, and then they fall down to the ground and they flap their wings. So you'll see if you find them like in the kitchen, on the kitchen counters after that, then you'll see that they're flapping their wings and they drop their wings.
So yeah, the wings fall off.
So the wings fall off very easily. There's a little layer where the wings attach to the body that is very weak. They drop their wings. And there's a very good reason for that. So let's presume this is outside and a male reproductive has managed to find a female reproductive that is suitable for him. Then what they do is they're going to become the king and the queen of the new colony.
No, cute.
So what they do is they mate and they burrow through the ground, which is why it has to happen when the ground is soft. So it happens after rain. They burrow into the ground, they go deep down into the ground, and they will start a new colony. Now, at first, they have to do all the jobs. They have to get the food, they have to do the cleaning, etc., etc. And then after they've managed to raise the first set of workers and soldiers, they no longer have to do all the work. So then what happens is the queen gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and she becomes a typical queen, and the male becomes the king, and their workers and soldiers look after them after that. Okay, so these are the winged reproductives. So I'm going to talk about the main reproductives, and then I'm going to talk a little bit later on about other reproductives. So the main reproductives have wings at one stage of their life, and are generally the only termites with well-developed eyes. And their tasks include reproduction, dispersal, and colony formation. And that's the story that I've just told you about now. Okay. Here you can see the queen. There's her head, and there's her thorax, and there's her big sack of eggs that is now what her abdomen has become. And here's the king, and there are some workers that are looking after them.
So does that thing burst, or do the eggs?
No, she just lays eggs. No, she can live for 25 years
Oh my
just
gosh.
laying eggs during this time.
Okay. What happens to her body?
Then how does it even happen?
It'll break down and it'll disintegrate and it gets cleaned out. And
So let's say like there's a little kid and he pops out a huge sack. What comes out?
eggs.
Like is it like liquid?
I have no idea.
It's
In
fine.
my youth as a child, I never did anything like that.
It's fine. You want
Let
to
me tell
kill
you
them.
What happens
Yes,
if
what?
They don't, if the guy and the girl they don't like hook up? Then what happens?
Oh, they just die.
They just die.
And, well, guys, the majority of them die. Think about how many of those flying ants come out of there.
So I mean,
The world would be overladen with termite colonies if all of them managed to hook up.
I killed him.
These hook up is not a scientific term. Yes.
I spray them with doom when they come back to I'll like die.
That's so mean.
This is disgusting. It flies in my head.
You know, my mom and dad said that when they were younger, they used to eat them.
Yes, they're they're an incredibly good source of
Yeah,
protein.
I used to eat them.
Yes.
I used to eat the wings.
Oh no, not the wings.
The wings taste like peanut butter.
You were that kid.
I was.
You were that kid who used to like crystallize that kid.
Okay, right. Guys, moving on. Let's try and finish this.
I was like 3.
Okay. In a typical termite colony, the king and the queen are the only active reproductives, and they perform no other function. They're fed by other termites, and some have lived up to 25 years. A mature queen can lay thousands of eggs every year, up to 1,000 a day. And in many termite species, but not all, the queen is monogamous. You happy with this word?
Only one mate.
Has only one mate. Okay, so you can play with that. Okay, so this is a typical termite colony. So there are cells inside it. It's got a chimney. It's got ventilation shafts, etc., etc.
Some architects there. They're very good architects.
They are. And then the king termite assists the queen in creating and attending to the colony initially. He continues to mate throughout his life to help increase the colony size. As the queen ages, her reproductive capacity declines. A colony may select what are called supplementary queens from the various developmental stages of reproductives. I'll talk about that. To assist the king and the queen by laying eggs. These ones never go on a colonizing flight. They just actually start to reproduce in the colony because the king and the queen are getting old.
How do they choose the supplementary queens? They're just like,
Yeah, they must have slightly different structures because they're fertile. Okay, all right. So we spoke about swarming. Okay, so the swarmers or winged reproductives are correctly termed alates. Okay, I've spoken about that. There's a flight of whatever. Very small percentage of swarming termites survive to initiate new colonies. Many are eaten by predators such as fishy winters, other insects, and birds. Okay.
Can I go now?
Yeah. Okay. The king and the queen care for the first generation on their own until they've raised enough workers to take over the job. The workers expand the nest. The queen's abdomen enlarges so she can lay more eggs. And it takes about 2 to 4 years for the colony to mature. Then the cycle starts again. Okay. You need to know this. So there's a king and a queen. They lay eggs. The eggs hatch into nymphs. Nymphs can become supplementary reproductives that have reproductive organs, or workers which are sterile, or soldiers which are sterile, or reproductive nymphs that become winged reproductives. The winged reproductives then can produce a new colony. These supplementary reproductives never make a new never go on a swarming flight. Okay. Right. Okay.
oh, so while the queen is busy laying her eggs, right? What does the king do? Does he just chill?
He parks off. He does a, what's his name? Prince Andrew. What's his name? No? Prince
Harry.
Harry. There we go. Okay.
Are they watching El Dorado in the next room?
So we will do one more section in this part of population studies. And then we'll do human population, then we finish population.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. Samantha, we done for today. We are. Ooh, cameraman. The cameraman.
Okay, Katie. See you, Papa.